War is rarely won on the battlefield. Long before the first kinetic strike is authorized, and long after the smoke clears, the deeper conflict unfolds in the silent, invisible corridors of the human mind. It begins with perception, with fear, with information, with the ability to convince an opponent that resistance is impossible, that retreat is inevitable, or that the next move belongs to someone else. For centuries, humanity has tried to understand the relationship between violence, strategy, and power. Why do states fight when the cost is obvious? Why do leaders choose escalation when compromise remains possible? And why, in some conflicts, does the battle begin long before the first shot is fired? More than 2.5 millennia ago, amid the blood-soaked terrain of China's Warring States period, a military strategist named Sun Tzu attempted to answer these questions. His name became associated with a text that would influence generations of military planners, political leaders, and strategists, The Art of War. But Sun Tzu did not write a manual of destruction. He wrote a study of advantage, of deception, of preparation, of knowing when to advance and when refusing to fight may be the most powerful move of all. His most enduring principle was simple yet revolutionary. To subdue the enemy without fighting is the highest form of skill. That sentence is not an argument against strength. It is an argument for using strength intelligently. For Sun Tzu, the best victory was not the one that left the battlefield covered in bodies. It was the one that made the battlefield unnecessary.
Today, this ancient logic remains visible in the way powerful states compete for survival. To understand how Sun Tzu's ideas operate in the modern world, we do not need to return only to ancient armies and walled cities. We can look at the present. We can look at the more than 4-decade rivalry between the United States and the Islamic Republic of Iran. Since the Iranian Revolution of 1979, relations between Washington and Tehran have passed through hostage crises, sanctions, diplomatic breakdowns, nuclear negotiations, covert pressure, regional confrontation, and repeated moments in which a wider war appeared possible. But this has not been a conventional war between two armies meeting openly on one battlefield. It has been a prolonged contest fought across several arenas at once. The economic arena, the information arena, the cyber arena, the diplomatic arena, and the arena of regional influence. This is what strategists often describe as the gray zone, the space between peace and full-scale war, where states compete aggressively while attempting to avoid the consequences of direct escalation. The United States has used economic statecraft, financial restrictions, diplomatic pressure, military deterrence, intelligence operations, and regional partnerships to limit Iran's power and influence. Iran has relied on a different combination of tools. regional alliances, armed partner groups, missile and drone capabilities, intelligence networks, cyber operations, and political influence. These tools do not function in exactly the same way, and the groups connected to Iran do not all possess identical goals and levels of independence. But together, they form part of a strategy designed to increase influence while raising the cost of direct confrontation.
Neither side has chosen to pursue a full-scale war because both understand the potential cost of escalation, casualties, economic shock, regional instability, and the possibility that a limited confrontation could become something much larger. So the conflict continues through pressure and response. Sanctions are answered with adaptation. Military deployments are answered with deterrence. Covert action is answered with retaliation. Diplomatic isolation is answered with alternative partnerships. Each side attempts to weaken the other without crossing the line that could trigger total war. This is not peace in the ordinary sense. It is competition under restraint. A war of patience. A war of calculation. A war in which the most important weapon may be the ability to shape the opponent's choices. But the gray zone has a human cost. When a government imposes economic pressure, the consequences do not remain inside government offices. They can reach medicine, food prices, employment, education, and ordinary families. When regional actors compete through armed partners, civilians may experience the conflict without ever seeing the people who made the decision. When cyber attacks target infrastructure, the victim may not know who struck or why. And when information becomes a weapon, citizens are asked to make judgments while living inside competing narratives, each claiming to represent the truth. This is the central moral problem of modern strategy. A state may describe its actions as deterrence. Its opponent may describe the same actions as aggression. One side calls a group an ally. The other calls it a proxy. One government calls sanctions pressure. Another calls them collective punishment. The language changes depending on where one stands, but the consequences are real, regardless of the language used to justify them. Sun Tzu taught strategists to think about position, timing, deception, and cost. The modern world must add another question. Who pays the price when strategy succeeds? If victory means forcing the opponent to change his behavior, then economic pressure may be considered a weapon. If victory means preventing an attack, then deterrence may appear successful even when no one sees the battle it prevented. If victory means preserving influence, then a state may accept years of tension rather than surrender its position. But if the conflict produces permanent fear, economic hardship, regional instability, and repeated cycles of retaliation, can either side truly claim victory? Sun Tzu's philosophy is often summarized as the art of winning without fighting. But the modern world forces us to ask a harder question. What if both sides believe they are winning because neither side is willing to admit that the conflict itself has become the trap? A strategy can be intelligent and still produce a dangerous result. A decision can be rational for one government and devastating for millions of people. And a conflict can remain below the level of open war while still destroying lives over decades. Sun Tzu's greatest lesson was not that war is inevitable.
It was that conflict must be understood before it is entered. The strongest strategist is not always the one with the largest army. It may be the one who understands the opponent's fears, the limits of his resources, the loyalties of his allies, and the choices he is trying to avoid. That is why the rivalry between the United States and Iran matters beyond the two countries themselves. It shows us how modern power operates when open war is considered too dangerous, but genuine peace remains too difficult. It shows us that the battlefield can be financial, digital, political, psychological, and regional all at once. And it reminds us that war does not always begin with an explosion. Sometimes it begins with a decision, a restriction, a threat, a secret agreement, a message sent through an ally, a story repeated until fear becomes policy. Before the battlefield, there is a battle for position. Before the first strike, there is a struggle to control perception, time, and choice. And before we ask who won the war, we must ask a more important